Imagine. Be a dreamer. Remember that you're not the only one. You're not the only one. We're all in this together. And as we express our spirituality, we can just know, we can hold the truth that there will be a time when the world will live as one. Imagine. The theme for this month is self-awareness is not enough. And the topic for this morning is, what is spirituality? What is spirituality? The Huffington Post had an article that said this: the term spiritual but not religious has emerged in recent years to describe how more and more Americans identify. Yes, religious affiliation has declined, but feelings of spiritual peace and well-being, wonder about the universe, both of those have significantly increased in the last decade across religious and non-religious groups. Even among the unaffiliated and those who say religion isn't particularly important to them, spiritual sentiment is strong and growing and growing. So while a percentage of people who claim to be religious has gone down, those of us who are open to spirituality, who are open to the depth of spirit expressing in, through, and as us, we are becoming more and more and more the majority. Now, I think it's interesting that our teaching, the Centers for Spiritual Living, used to be called Religious Science. Now, that name was changed, and I don't know if any of you can remember having people say, is that like Scientology? Yeah. Well, that was one of the names, one of the reasons that the name was changed. But also, Centers for Spiritual Living more accurately describes who we are, because that's who we are and it's what we teach. Now, lots of people have left religions that no longer serve them, that no longer make their hearts sing, that no longer seem to make sense and work. And I think that could probably include some of us here in this room. But we still consider ourselves spiritual. Not religious, but spiritual. As a kid and adolescent and young adult, I was very active in a Presbyterian church. And then after 1 year of college, I went away to be a VISTA volunteer. And I worked with the Department of Mental Health in West Virginia. And I also had a chance to do some work and some marching for civil rights. And so I was all fired up. And when I came back to my hometown of Compton, California, I was surprised. I went back to my church, and lo and behold, they were having a vote on whether or not to welcome blacks into the community. Okay, this was in the 60s, but whether or not to welcome blacks into the church. And now, the vote was no. The vote was no. And so, as you may have guessed, that church didn't survive very long. And that was an important thing for me, because that decision in this community that I loved, that decision, along with the whole thing about sinners and hell and having to be saved and all of that, made it so that I didn't want to have anything to do with organized religion. Anything. And that lasted for years. Now, when my kids were young, I thought, it would be good to have them have some religious foundation. And so we lived in a very small town at the time, and we went to the only church in town. It was Methodist, and that didn't work either, because it was the same kind of oppression, the same kind of teaching. And I didn't want my kids to grow up having been told that they were born in original sin, and that they needed something other than what was already given to them by God to be okay. And so we didn't stay there long. That didn't work. But I never lost my belief in a God of love. I never lost that knowing that there is something greater that is all around us and in us and through us. And so, of course, because I was open, because I wanted to grow spiritually, I got the opportunities. I studied astrology and got into the readings of Edgar Cayce and Shakti Gawain and, lots of people that many of you would recognize, spiritual teachings, and eventually really got into knowing about the importance of meditation. And so I was part of a Hindu spiritual group and called Ananda Marga. And actually that's where I got the name Jyoti. As many of you know, it's a teaching name. It means divine flame. And the idea is that each time I hear it or say it, I'm reminded that in each one of us, there is that divine light that it can be called Christ consciousness, it can be called the divine spark, but it is in every single one of us. Now, unfortunately, after a short period of time, or maybe fortunately, I discovered that the religious group that I was part of was extremely homophobic. And so that didn't work. Obviously, they were not going to welcome gays and lesbians, and so it was not, obviously, a place for me. So like many of you, I just explored a lot of different avenues of spirituality. And it finally led me to, it was Mile High Church for me, Centers for Spiritual Living, it was religious science at the time, to the science of mind and spirit. I think that's a journey that many of us have taken through, follow this, and then we end up exactly where we're supposed to be. Exactly where we're supposed to be. So what is this spirituality that we say we are about? What is it? Of course, spirituality comes from the word spirit, which comes from the Latin word spiritus, which means to breathe. To breathe. Because spirit is the very breath that breathes us. It is the very life that lives us. It's the vision that pulls us. And it's the love that surrounds us and infuses us and moves through us in powerful ways. Ernest Holmes said, spirituality is the consciousness that comes through communing with God. He also said, spirituality is a constant, consistent attempt to feel the presence of God in everything and everyone. So spirituality is that experience of the divine. It's our openness to the experience of the divine, openness to feeling it in us and through us, guiding us. I don't know about any of you, but boy, there are times that I really need guidance, and I can get it from that inner spirit. It's recognizing that the one intelligence and creative energy in the universe is all that there is. And that the Creator and all that it has created are made of the same stuff, the same godness. We couldn't be here. There is no substance other than godness that we could be made of. It's all we are. And spirituality affirms that there's no separation. No separation, not only between us and our Creator, but between all of us. Right here where I am, God is. Right here where you are, where all of us are, Godness is. And there is a oneness in that, an absolute oneness. I don't have to go looking for it. All I have to do is recognize that it is here, and I get to use it. I get to use it. When we recognize the presence of the divine, It empowers us, and we get to use it. Now, often religion and spirituality are talked about together. So let's look at religion just a little bit. What is religion? The word religion comes from the Latin word religare, which means to tie together or to bind. Now, the thinking is that tying together is the tying together between us and the Creator. There's also the thought of the tying together of all of us, all people who are in religious community together. And one other thought is that maybe the tying together has to do with how people can be tied by religion. So religion and spirituality are often compared and contrasted, and here are some of the comparisons that are made. Belief versus experience. Belief versus experience. While many religions require that you believe certain things, in spirituality, what we aim to do is experience the divine. And that includes experimenting with it. Because what we're asked to do is we're asked to see if this stuff works in our life. We're asked to actually get into that place of mind where we say, I can settle in, I can feel the presence of the divine in me and as me and through me. I can follow these principles and see whether or not they work. Because if the principles of our teaching don't work, why would we want to use them? Why would we want to use them? And of course, many of the churches, the formal religions, they want you to believe certain things not only about God, but about why you're here, why you're even alive, and of course, what will happen after you die. I mean, because we all know that, you know. Ernest Holmes tells us to use the teachings of the science of mind to try them and see for ourselves whether or not they work. And the difference between religion and spirituality is sometimes experienced as the difference between living in fear and living in love. For there are certainly many religious teachings that encourage people to be afraid of a judgmental God, be afraid of what they will experience in the hereafter, be afraid that unless they follow the rules just right, it's not going to work out well for them at all for eternity. And spirituality, on the other hand, encourages us to trust in the universe, to trust that we live in a universe that is safe, that is supportive of us, that is loving, that is a really good place to be. And we don't need to worry about what's going to happen later. Now, there can also be differences in beliefs about whether or not whether we're original sinners or whether we are original blessings. And I claim that we are all original blessings. And there are thoughts about whether God is out there, some God to be placated and pleased, or whether God is within us. And of course, spirituality knows that it is within us. We don't have to look outside of ourselves to find God, to find the divine. Another difference is the belief in one true religion versus universality. Because there are certainly people out there, and I can remember when I was a teenager in the Presbyterian church, we were taught that, this is the teaching. You have to believe this. And you need to go out and convert other people. You need to go, I remember them taking us as teenagers to the beach and telling us to go save people. I still get, nervous thinking about that. It's not right. It's just not right. Whereas in spirituality, we know that there's nobody that we need to fix. There's nobody that we need to change or convert. There's just none of that. We can trust that every individual is on their sacred path and that for them it is perfect, absolutely perfect. Now, Ernest Holmes talked about being open at the top, being open to new inspiration, new guidance from God, new words. I mean, God didn't just stop talking when the Bible was written, any of the Bibles. And that, of course, doesn't always go along with religions where people are taught, don't think too much about it, just believe it. It is so, and don't question it. Whereas spirituality encourages questioning, encourages us to use our minds and our intellects, encourages us to be open to newness, to truly be open at the top. At Centers for Spiritual Living, we don't tell you what to think, but we do teach that your thoughts are what create your life. We teach that if you want to make a difference in your life, if something isn't working, there are spiritual principles that can be used, that you can use them. And that's what we teach. But do we have to choose between being religious and spiritual? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It is not one or the other. Religion and spirituality are not mutually exclusive. I'm sure that there are just as many deeply spiritual people who call themselves religious as there are deeply spiritual people who say that they are spiritual but not religious. Spirituality can show up anywhere, and it does. I think we have probably all known people who were just sacred and deep in their faith, incredibly spiritual people, no matter what their religious attachment. Those mindsets can go either way, because certainly within spirituality, there are some people who have some pretty fixed ideas as well. Every religion includes mystics and teachers, and of course the Abrahamic religions, Judaism and Islam and Christianity, those that are most prevalent in our culture, they all have mystical prophets, mystical teachers, mystical saints. Of course, some of the best known are Sister Teresa of Avila and St. Francis of Assisi, and then, of course, the Islamic, the Sufi mystics, Rumi and Hafiz, whose poetry is just so filled with the divine, so filled with divine love. And of course, both religion and spirituality have been criticized. Religion is criticized because there are some religions that have been overtaken by power-hungry people, by greedy people. We're both human and divine, and sometimes that humanity shows up even in places where we would rather it didn't. And of course, religion is criticized because so many atrocious acts have been perpetrated in the name of God, in the name of religion. And certainly they were misguided, but they have been criticized for that. Now, the primary criticism of spirituality is that we do a little too much navel gazing and neglect needed action in our lives. Neglect needed action. That means we don't do what's needed for us that we're being called to do things in the world, and instead we're just staying real inward. We're focusing inward, and not paying attention to what we're being called to do. Ernest Holmes said, "One of the great difficulties in the new order of thought is that we are likely to indulge in too much theory and too little practice." Too much theory and too little practice. Because, of course, it's incredibly important to do our meditation, but then we need to move our feet. We need to do what we're called to do. But our theme for the month is self-awareness is not enough. So how do we take our spirituality into the world? How do we move it from this place of being in a wonderful, peaceful place, but how do we live it? How do we make it real? Now, if we're consistent about our spiritual practices, meditation and prayer and visioning and affirmations, all those things that we teach, then if we're consistent about it, then we can't help but have people see our spirituality. We can't help but go out into the world with some patience and some love and some understanding and compassion. When we start each day connected to the divine, remembering that we are one with it, how could our lives not show that? How could they not show that? If we're really listening to and following the guidance of God or the universe or whatever we call it, how could we not do anything that we need to do for ourselves personally or for our communities or for the world? Now, I'm not saying we all have to do everything. We don't and we can't. But there are things that we are called to do, people that we are called to pray for, that we are called to serve. And of course, this is Valentine's week. Don't you just love it? I know that there are some Hershey's Kisses back there, for snacks later. If you eat those as you do, remember that they are filled with love, and so are you. But in this Valentine's week, we can take our spirituality out into the world by spreading love wherever we go. Imagine that you can send love right now to your children and grandchildren, to your families and friends that live far away. Imagine that they can just be surrounded by it, that love is what they're breathing in. Imagine that the energy of love flows right out of your heart to theirs. Imagine that you can fill your home and your workplace with the energy of love, even more love than there is now. Imagine that as you walk around in your home, you are walking through the energy of love and soaking it up. That everyone that comes into your workplace or your residence, everyone that comes into that energy of love is blessed. And whether you see it or not, it makes a difference. It makes a difference. Imagine the energy of love surrounding you as you sleep at night. And imagine that this energy of love that you are walking around and sleeping and doing everything that you're doing, and imagine that it shows up as health, as extravagant, radiant health. Imagine that this love shows up as abundance, as joy, as opportunities, as anything it is that is needed for you to be the magnificent expression of the divine that you have come here to be. Can you imagine that? Imagine. Dream it. Spread love wherever you are. And let's move into prayer. I am grateful for the oneness. Grateful for the oneness that is love, that is all around us. Grateful that we get to direct it with our intention. Grateful, grateful, grateful. Grateful also for all people who are on spiritual paths other than ours, knowing that there is a oneness. We encircle them in love. We know that they are divine beings as well. That just as each of us is on our own spiritual journey, so are they. Led, blessed, abundant. And so I know that as we go through our week, each one of us here, we walk each step into love. I declare that it fills our paths, that it fills our homes, that it fills our cars, that it fills the roads that we drive on. I declare that there is love everywhere we go. And I declare that each of us remembers that we receive sweet, delightful reminders from the universe that love is here for us and that we are here for love. And so I know that there is a healing taking place in anything in anyone's life that is calling for healing. That every cell, system, and organ of each of our bodies here is divinely expressing the perfect pattern from which it was created. And so I declare that there is physical healing happening right this moment. I declare that there is emotional healing happening, that there is financial healing happening. That Spirit moves in, through, and as us. Spirit expresses our spirituality in, through, and as us in magnificent, wonderful, loving ways. I'm grateful that I can speak these words and know that they are being spoken into the law of everything that creates. It only knows how to say yes. And so I'm grateful that it has said yes to all I have spoken. I let it go. I let it be. And so it is.